Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day you're watching this. I hope it finds you well. My name is John, and I am an author, and I would like to welcome you to another Writing Wednesday, where I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of my writing processes and how I approach things. And this Wednesday, I'm going to be talking about writing characters in particular. I would say this is one where I'm starting as I've developed and matured as a writer. Writing characters or fleshing out characters is something that I have certainly improved on. One of the I tend to be very much a sort for lack of a better word, a more plot focused writer where I'm really focused on okay, well, what are the themes of the story? What story am I trying to tell? You know, and a lot of my planning things out is how to get my characters from point A to point B to gain the skills or knowledge that they need to get them to where they need to go in a believable way, which has the tendency, at least in my own opinion, especially in my, in the earlier works in my rough drafts, for sometimes my characters to all sound kind of the same, namely like me, um, as they're just sort of filling holes and roles in the story. It is one of the things that I particularly do a lot when I go back and I'm editing, is looking to add more information, add more detail to the characters, flesh them out, give them their own personality, maybe throw in a little friction or conflict even among like main characters or characters that are supposed to be allies or friends. And that's just sort of, evolved from, and let them evolve from there. Um, to a degree, I feel like this is something that I've been expanding on, and in particular, the book I'm writing now, my third, When Gods Do Metal. Um, I feel like I'm having a lot better success with sort of just like coming up and featuring characters where, as I've been planning out the story, I've been paying a little bit more attention to like the characters that I introduce or that come in, of thinking about, okay, where are they from? What sort of background do they have? What might they be thinking, feeling, and how would they interact with things? Um, and just coming up with, sort of how to flesh them out. Um, and then sometimes it just sometimes it's as with any other writing, and I'm going to make a video sometime in the next few weeks about sort of how to approach when writing comes easy versus when writing comes hard, or when I've already got a clear idea in my head, or when I'm sort of making it up as I go. um it is sometimes it just comes to me like, sometimes it's okay, I they my main character or my main group needs to meet this character who needs to help them out to do this or oppose them in doing that, or whatever the situation might be. And sometimes it's very easy, like I think a little bit about the background and personality and why they'd be either helping or hindering what's going on, and it just flows. Sometimes it takes a lot of chipping away to get there. um, in my first book, they're one of my sort of major secondary characters. I knew from when I was planning out the story, that she was going to be important. I knew what I needed her to do for the story. But it was one of my great bits of like writing block of, I got my main character and another secondary character is traveling with him to, where they meet her. and I knew where it needed to go after she decided to side with them and support them and what she was going to do. But how to get them from between the two was a major period of writer's block that really got me for. I was also a senior in college, so I did have other stuff going on, but take a drink here a second. All right. But that just but once I solved that knot, and pieced together sort of what I wanted her character to be, who I wanted her to be in relation to my main characters, to her family, why she was why she would support my main characters and how they would interact. Like once I finally solved that knot, she easily became one of my like favorite characters to write, and I found it just very easy to like inhabit who she was supposed to be when I was writing dialogue for her or attributing actions to her. Um, so that came together very well. Um, yeah, others, just sort of, I have to flesh out and flesh out and flesh out. It was, another major character in my first book, my main character, Valinar's brother, Targatha. Oh, it was 5 or 6 edits before I managed to capture where I wanted him to be. Like, at first he was just a fairly passive character, and then very much a conflicted and stern older brother. And in another version, he came back to being a little more just, passive, and really sort of managed to, it took, like I said, years of editing with lots of breaks in between, but to sort of mold him into the shape that I was more or less happy with. Um, I find it easy. Like a lot of it is sort of coming up with like personality and personality traits. Um, One of my favorite of the most recent book I'm writing, When Gods Do Metal. I've had a couple that have just sort of come to me. Is I said the I've talked about it a little bit, but the story is very. There's sort of a threat to the whole Terra or world, um, but most of the focus is on a specific small group of people going about their own quest of what to do. And but I wanted to, because what they were doing is going to be and was important to the larger events on the Terra, and I didn't want them just to be constantly like, oh, they've passed through another town and they've learned about this, that, and the other thing. I do that sometimes because I think that does add a lot of character, and it's sort of one of the interesting things is sort of how news and rumor travels. Um, but I wanted to take back, so I created these interludes based around this older king or general. And I just to have I just ended up for a while like fleshing out his backstory about how he was the king and emperor of one place, and then a king ended up a king in another place through a strange series of events, and now is king of a third place and is a really, really well regarded general. So I created this whole story for him. But I didn't really I wanted to avoid a couple of the classic traps of writing characters, is I didn't want to just have a long exposition of someone going, oh, well, this guy, he did this, and this is how he rose to power, and this is how he left power, and then he sailed over here, and just this pages and pages and pages of either just the narrator basically telling what's going on, or one character in the story telling another character of the story who, especially for such a well known figure, should probably know at least some of this. but you're having this like forced exposition in there. Um, so I came up with the idea that this guy who's this is a fantasy world, so there's different races, but this guy is a human, about 80 years old, and I came up with the idea that he sort of plays with, he plays on the fact that, most pretty much anyone would view an 80-year-old human as like older and frail and possibly out of touch and going senile. So I gave him the tendency to sort of talk through, like, speak in anecdotes from his past, as, at least sometimes older people have a tendency to do when telling stories. They like relating anecdotes of their past. So do I. Life calls me Grandpa Holtgreave sometimes for my tendency to tell and retell stories from my past that I find interesting or amusing, and repeat them. So I gave him that sort of where he tends to, rather than answer a question directly, kind of answers it in like metaphor, talking about his past, like, you know, the one of the interludes, someone who, clearly he thinks is either up to no good or is being tricked themselves, is asking him to, lend his armies to support. And, rather than saying yes or no directly, his response is like, ah, yes, being asked for help reminds me of the time, you know, where I was asked to do this and I marched my army out and I almost got my army destroyed. And just speaking like that to, either lull the people he's talking with to in a false sense of security, or make him think he's senile, even though he's very, very not. Still, the character trait is either when the chips are down or when it's needed, or when nobody who doesn't, no outsiders or nobody who doesn't know him well is around. He's still sharp as attack. But I came up with that, and I've been really enjoying writing his little interludes and information. Um, and sometimes I really need to stop doing that. And sometimes it comes up that, um, you know, some characters. That's one character that just flowed. I've definitely gotten like more into writing sort of more like secondary or side characters in particular. I'm overall pretty happy with the main six characters I have in the sort of main party so far in my story, and I feel like they each show different roles and have the little like spats and teasing and stuff like that comes with friendship and long companionship. But I've been having fun throwing some other characters in there, like they're helped out in my most recent chat. One of the more recent chapters I wrote by, the cousin who's like a traveling merchant of one of the main characters, who's sort of this, you know, you know, gruff but overall good-hearted character. And it took me a little bit of thinking through to figure out how I wanted, my main characters to sort of travel incognito. Came up that they'd be traveling with this caravan, and originally I had them hiring, just that was the plot conveyance, and originally I had them hiring their own wagon, but then I figured it made more sense to find someone they knew. So having this, um, having a cousin of one of my main characters, like, I don't think, like, the instant I sort of put all of those pieces together, similar to the general, like, that character just sort of just flows off the page, to the point where I'm seriously considering whether to feature him again in the future or bring him back. Is really only intended to be in the one chapter. There's still quite a lot of book left, though, but I might bring him back later in the story now, just because I had so much fun writing the character. So yeah, that's a little bit. Anyway, that's a little bit, or some of the things that I go through and trying to come up with a character that, I often start with a plot and deciding where I need characters, big, small, medium, to fill spaces in the story and fill roles in the story, and then try to, before I sit down and writing, sort of, more than I used to, like, rather than just have them play their part, I dedicate some of my sort of thinking, visualizing, daydreaming, pre-planning, whatever you want to call it, time, to really coming up with sort of their backstory and personality, and it helps sort of write it out. And then a lot of it is going back in drafts and sort of changing some of the wording and matters of speech to, make the characters seem more distinct from each other and not just sort of avatars for me, which I feel was probably, again, the bigger problem in, like, the first couple drafts of my first book was definitely an issue. And I think and hope I've gotten better, even though I still would consider myself a plot first writer who then, slots characters in where they need to go from there. Um, Thank you for watching me talk about some more about my writing process. I if you have any thoughts, I would love to hear them. What you do to write or come up with characters, what you think makes an interesting character, how you go about planning it out. Are you a plot first or character first writer? No wrong answers there. Just curious. I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas and comments down below, as well as just to plug for myself a little bit, as usual, to end these videos. I have two books currently available on Amazon. We have my first book, The Shadow of the Past. That will be linked below, as is And the Sunburned Red, which is my second book, also available on Amazon and also linked below. Um, all that in mind, please like, share, subscribe, comments. Any of that would be greatly appreciated. Also, down below, I have my personal blog, which I'd also love you to take a look at, share, and like, follow, etc. As well as my socials. You feel free. Love to have you follow me there too. But in the meantime, I do hope you all have a wonderful day and have a chance to do something creative. Catch you on the next one.